The colonization of America began in 202 AD, when the Roman Empire dominated Europe. The Roman Emperor is Lucius Septimius Severus Augustus, 56-year-old. Septimius is always looking for a way to expand the borders of the empire. During a military expedition in Mauritania Tingitana, now Morocco, the emperor learns that a new archipelago of islands has been discovered off the coast of Africa, the islands that today are called the Azores. The Romans already knew the Canary Islands and Madeira. Severus wondered, if there are many islands near the African coast, perhaps further west there are other lands, perhaps uninhabited, perhaps rich. Arriving in Rome in 203, he orders the preparation of a naval expedition to see what's beyond the sea. The Romans had the capability to build a ship sturdy enough to cross the Atlantic. Roma had extensive long-distance maritime trade. Ships went to Egypt and India routinely. They had a navy of hundreds of ships. Greeks and Phoenicians, the best shipbuilders of those times, were under the dominion of Rome. In the year 204, the ship is ready. It's a greater version of their own merchant ships. It is about 60 meters long, with a capacity over 1,000 tons and a crew of 60 sailors and 20 legionaries. In the summer of 204, the ship from the Azores set sail westwards, towards the open sea. Crossing the Atlantic is dangerous, but the travel is not impossible at all. This Frenchman did it in an inflatable, with no water or food. A replica of a pharaonic Egyptian reed boat did it in 57 days. These two guys rowed across the Atlantic from Manhattan to England. So, a reinforced Roman merchant ships would be capable of crossing a mild Atlantic. The ship catches the ocean currents that carry towards the Caribbean and the American East Coast. The Romans did not have the compass, but oriented themselves by the stars and the sun. The trip is not easy. There are strong winds and huge waves, different from those in the Mediterranean, protests from the crew because they want to turn back. However, after about 40 days, the Romans came into sight of a huge, uninhabited island whose boundaries they could not even discern, covered with dense vegetation of tall trees, rich in wildlife and abundant water sources. For a month they sail north, exploring the territories without seeing traces of human presence. Having reached more or less the height of New York, they head east and return to Europe, to avoid the winter. They are lucky, because in this way they manage to exploit the currents and winds that push from the east coast of America towards the northwest, Great Britain and the rest of Europe. Then they arrive in Rome. The news of an immense island, almost uninhabited and rich in forests and food, convinces the emperor to organize a new expedition the following year, with 20 ships, numerous legionaries but also hundreds of settlers. The first colony is founded in a beautiful bay on the right bank of the Ashton River in North Carolina, where the city of Charleston now stands. The city will be named Severicum, in honor of the emperor. This is the beginning of the colonization of America. First they build the castrum, the fortification within the Roman legions reside. It has a wall made with wood and stones and ditches a couple of meters deep. A colony of a few thousands of settlers could pretty much function on its own from the start. Cattle will be one of the first things the settlers will bring to America, and the first crops of wheat and spelt would soon arrive. The first encounters with indigenous populations soon occur. In the year 200, the eastern forests were sparsely populated. The Indian communities were concentrated mainly in the Mississippi-Missouri Valley and in the Great Lakes area. Along the Atlantic coast, there were small bands of hunters-gatherers, sometimes consisting of a single family, often nomadic. These tribes will attack the colonists' settlements. There will be clashes, ambushes, violences, as the Romans will settle in the best lands, the fertile lands along the rivers and in the few non-swampy plains. But these small, isolated communities had no way of repelling Roman colonization. The heavy armored infantry of a legion would have rejected any native force. The cavalry would have terrorized the local warriors. They never saw an horse. Within a few decades, the natives would have been wiped out or assimilated. In the following years, the Romans begin to found new settlements along the Atlantic coast. In the major cities there are temples, baths, amphitheaters, public buildings such as the Forum with mosaic floors. A legatus would be appointed by the emperor to govern the new province. The new province could be called Atlantis, in honor of Atlas, who gives his name to the ocean, or Asperia, or Septimia, in honor of the emperor. In this video, America will be called America, from the Latin Amnicerica, creek of the heather flowers. This is the name the Romans gave to the first river they encountered upon landing in the new land, and which gave its name to the region, then to the entire colony. It seems like a nice name, worth the 20 hours I spent thinking about it. The Roman colony will have trading relations with the more developed Indian cultures of the Mississippi and the Great Lake. The Vikings also tell of frequent exchanges of goods with the native. The Romans find in the Indians a source of slaves, important for the Roman economy, and of women, since Roman women in America were few, at least in the early decades. The Romans will discover the longer but safer route in the north, the same that was used by the Vikings. It is a sort of island hopping with never more than a few days' sail from land. Further colonies would be founded in the Caribbean islands, almost uninhabited at the time, and Bermuda, a useful stopover in the middle of the Atlantic. The periodic crisis of the Roman Empire, due to barbarian invasions, civil conflicts and unrest, increase emigration to the more peaceful and tranquil American colony. Rome was plenty of poor people who would be willing to take a chance and head out to in this Nova Patria in search of land and wealth. Around 400 AD, the boundary between the Roman and Indian worlds, the limes, is placed along the Appalachian Mountains and in the swamps of the south, natural boundaries. The Romans will come into contact with the Maya. Around 300 AD, the Maya civilization was composed of numerous independent city-states, in a situation similar to that of ancient Greece. They practiced agriculture, which included corn, tomatoes, cocoa, tobacco, and chili peppers that the Romans would export to Europe. But, above all, they would have finally found a source of gold, enormously enriching the American colony. The Roman Empire collapses around 480 AD, but the empire's support for the American colony will begin to wane much sooner, as the Romans will lose control of Britain and their bases in Iceland and Greenland. After the fall of Rome, America will experience a tumultuous period of anarchy and instability. The Roman colony could split into a series of kingdoms struggling for hegemony, as happened in Britannia. We have little information about this period. Surviving written accounts tell of wars between the various reigns and against the raids of the native, battles which exact locations are no longer known, uncertain dates, events considered doubtful by modern scholars, legendary kings routinely killed by assassination, execution, or in battle. Most of the naval knowledge will be lost, as well the ports in Hispania and Africa. The northern route will be the only viable way to reach Europe for centuries. As happened in Great Britain, the Saxon populations began to raid the Roman cities along the American coast, which nevertheless remained very rich compared to Europe, but also to settle with their families in the new areas. The Saxons are also employed as mercenaries in the wars between the kingdoms and against the natives who, from the other side of the Appalachians, often invaded the Roman territories. The term Saxon refers to the German tribes Saxons, Jutes, and Angles originating from the coasts of Germany and Holland who raided Britain, and in this case America, from bases in Iceland and Canada. They were good sailors. The Danes and Norwegians, called Vikings, also came to America to find an outlet for their population explosion at that period. It's possible that the Saxons and Danes conquer some of the northern kingdoms, although a full-scale, massive invasion with large armies as happened in England, where the Saxons eventually managed to take control of the entire island, is unlikely. The Roman kingdoms would maintain a certain stability and military structures, as happened in the Byzantine Empire. The Vikings would not plunder anywhere at will. The chaos will end when one of the kingdoms, around the year 700, manages to gain supremacy and incorporate the other. Partly with wars, partly with dynastic unions between kingdoms, partly with feudal relationships between the main kingdom and the secondary kingdoms, which will become duchies, maybe even with a couple of battles of Hastings. Perhaps the kingdom to gain hegemony will be Nova Civitas, today's New York, which will change its name to Nova Roma, imposing a ruling dynasty that will become the ruling house of America. The Kingdom of America has born. The king and his nobles will restore the social order lost after the fall of Rome. The newfound peace and relative security in a land that is very rich, the integration of Saxons and a new wave of immigration from a Europe increasingly devastated by wars and invasions and attracted by the prosperity of the new kingdom will lead to a sharp increase in population. The route is well established, the technology to make the crossing is well known and replicable. The large-scale immigration of both men and women from Europe to America in the 16th century will occur earlier. Since the route passes through the north, the migrating populations are mainly Germanic and Scandinavian, just as, in our chronology, they emigrated to Great Britain. The social and cultural mixing of Germanic and Scandinavian tribes with previously arrived Italics, Hispanics, Britons and Gaul settlers, some of whom married with native women, will give birth to the modern American people. Now, an empire experiencing a massive population explosion will begin to seek new lands to the west. At this point, the expansion will begin. Beyond the Appalachians lies the Mississippi Valley, home to a large Native American population dispersed in little camps without any protection as palisade, walls, and ditches. The territory is poorly defined. Population density is low. Agriculture is rare. They are led by chiefs without much decision-making power. There never were organized Indian nations or reigns. However, some tribes may have had contact with the Romans through trade, and some of them may even have joined the Roman army, gaining experience and fighting technique. The horse may already have been widespread among the Indians. The Mississippi River Valley is one of the most fertile basins on planet. It is capable of feeding hundreds of millions of people even with the agricultural technology of 800 AD. Where is food there is people, and where there are large concentrations of people there are powerful empires. The Mississippi will be the first target of the American Empire. The conquest will be slow, similar to the Roman Gallic War, made up of battles but also diplomacy and agreements. The Roman Empire was never based on race, like the Mongol Empire, for example. The Romans integrated the conquered peoples. The emperors themselves were not all Italics by birth, but also Hispanics, Gauls, Syrians, Illyrians. This will facilitate expansion into the Mississippi Valley. It would have been an unequal fight. The native tribes will never be able to keep up with the Europeans in terms of innovation or population. The Roman heavy cavalry, covered from head to toe in metal armor, would have been virtually unkillable to the natives. The native will not be able to unite. And if you're going to stop Nova Roma, all of the natives of the Great Plains need to unite, nothing less. By the end of the 800, the Romans may have already controlled large areas of the Great Plains. Land-hungry Nova Roma will always be expanding. In the north, the Romans gained control of the Great Lakes through a process of both conquest and large-scale migration. The Mayan Empire enters into decline around the year 800. Endemic internecine warfare, abandonment of cities, the ending of dynasties. The Romans could insert themselves into the power struggles between the Maya city-states, siding with one faction or another, playing one off against the other to gain an advantage. Exploiting divisions and rivalries is their style. Rome could have conquered those areas in a relatively short time. Near present-day Mexico City stand the great metropolis of Teotihuacan, which had often interfered in Mayan affairs. Teotihuacan was the largest city in the Americas, with a population that had been estimated at more than 120,000, making it at least the sixth largest city in the world during its epoch. It was in decline since year 700, and the disruptions in tributary relations caused by the Romans will accelerate its decline. The war with Teotihuacan may have been similar to that with Carthage. The Romans might have sacked and burned it before 900, then filled the power vacuum left and vassalized the surrounding cities, such as Zacacalco and Tula. If the Romans control this area, Nahua peoples will not migrate to central Mexico from the north. Every attempt to invasion will be repelled. So the Aztec Empire will never exist. The Inca Empire would never arise either. Around year 900 in the Andes there were two large empires. The Tiwanaku, based around Lake Titicaca, and the Wari, centered near the city of Ayacucho. Both empires have no way to repel Rome that now is a superpower. The Romans have a strong ally: disease. The plagues that ravaged Europe did most of the killing for the Europeans when they came to America. The Romans had plenty of that. They already had smallpox. They had the plague of Justinian was caused by Yersinia pestis, the same of the Black Death of 1300. Even the common flu had devastating effects on those populations, rapidly decimating them, creating chaos and fear, and undermining the social and political structures that held those empires together. The Inca people remain a pastoral tribe in the Cusco area. The Amazon rainforest acts like the Sahara Desert, preventing the Romans from advancing into Brazil, but they will continue to expand towards the Pacific, into Canada and the Caribbean islands, transforming the Caribbean into a second Mare Nostrum. The pagan religion could last longer in America, maybe even after 800. The first colonists were Roman legionaries and Christianity was not widespread among them. Furthermore, the new Germanic and Norse immigrants were pagans. However, during the 8th or 9th century, the American Empire will be converted to Christianity by missionaries from Ireland and the continent, and Christianity eventually becomes the official religion of the American Empire. But there will certainly be a schism between the Catholic Church of Rome and the American Church, as happened with the Eastern Orthodox Church. There will be frictions and theological disputes about useless things like the date on which Easter fell, the way monks cut their hair, the procession of the Holy Spirit. Don't ask me what is. But the main reason for the schism is political: the rejection of the authority of the Roman Pope. The Romans in America may have developed a distinct language, a mix of Latin and a set of Germanic dialects, which would become a new language. We therefore arrive around the year 1200. This empire would likely be the most powerful country in the world, with maybe only the Mongol Khans in China being their rival. America would be a European-style kingdom, with a king or queen, a court, and nobles. The American landscape would be similar to the European one, with castles made with stones, Romanesque and Gothic churches, cathedrals, monasteries and fortified cities surrounded by walls, because there would certainly be uprisings, rebellions, battles for control of the throne, and tensions between the empire's regions that could erupt into civil wars. No problem, it happens everywhere and every time. The empire will last. There will be not Atlantic slave trade from Africa to America. The need for cheap labor will be met by Native American populations, who will not be exterminated as in your timeline. Slavery, fundamental to the Roman economic structure, may last a long time, even if it won't be based on race. The history of Europe will not change that much, at least until 1500, and the relations between America and Europe would have been the same that had characterized Europe with China for millennia, an exchange of high-value goods and little else. There may be naval battles for control of trade routes in the Atlantic and to repel European attempts to settle in South America, but nothing more. Without America, the European powers will find a way to alleviate demographic pressure and the need for raw materials with greater aggression toward Asia and Africa. Bad news for blacks, who could end up like Native Americans. However, France never had significant colonies in America, nor did the Netherlands. The British Empire could replace America with China and the Middle East. So the European powers might be only slightly less powerful than in our timeline, perhaps with the exception of Spain and Portugal. But the Roman American Empire will be larger than the English and French empires, more cohesive, populous, and rich in natural resources. A sort of Great Britain on steroids. An empire that will attempt to become the dominant world power. Soon the European wars will see the involvement of the Roman Kingdom of America.